Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Windows Business Weekly, and today I want to talk about how to manage media files in Windows, so stay tuned. So we talk a lot about managing files like Word, Excel, this kind of file that of course most businesses deal with on a day-to-day basis. But there are also a lot of organizations that need to manage large media files, whether it be photographs or videos or audio files. Now, this process of managing this type of file is called digital asset management. That is the fancy word for it. So if you want to search for software that is used for managing photos, for instance, you might search for DAM, Digital Asset Management, if you're looking for that particular category of software. So there are a couple of tips that I want to share with you today about how you might go about managing this kind of file. Now, the first question that really needs to be answered is, where are you going to store this kind of file? Now, of course, you could store files locally on a disk on your notebook or your PC, and we all know, just like with any other kind of file, that becomes very inconvenient when you want to share files. And as we know, most notebooks have a very small amount of storage, so you won't be able to keep very many files on your notebook. Now, in my mind, the best way is to use a good old-fashioned traditional file server or network attached storage. Now, of course, you could store media files in the cloud, but that's rather likely to become quite expensive, because if you want to pay for fast accessible storage in the cloud, it doesn't come cheaply. And of course, these files take up a huge amount of space. So in most cases, local storage, network attached storage, or a file server is going to be the fastest way to get access to your files and the most cost effective. So if you choose the local file server option, you can of course connect preferably over Ethernet, because it's going to be much faster to pull those files onto your local device. But what about backing up the files? So there are of course many strategies again for this. You could back up to tape, you could back up to another NAS device, you could back up to standalone disks, for instance. And while I said that the cloud is probably not the ideal solution for storing large media files, you might actually consider it for backing up, for instance, a network attached storage disk. So why is it different for backup? Because with backup, you can choose a different kind of storage in the cloud. So for instance, Azure and Amazon, they allow you to create storage blobs that are designed especially for archiving files. Now, these kinds of blobs are much cheaper than it would otherwise be to normally access files with fast access. But archive blobs, of course, they're designed especially for files that are very rarely going to be accessed. And you can get this kind of cloud storage much cheaper. Now, if you're going to use network attached storage, you need to think about, does this storage support backing up to the cloud? Now, I have a Ready NAS. I know that this definitely supports backing up to Dropbox, to OneDrive, to Amazon, to Azure storage. You've got all of those options. And I'm pretty sure that Synology supports and QNAP supports most of these different technologies as well. But of course, you need to check that out. So once you've got your storage sorted out and where you're going to back up your files, of course, crucially important, you also need to think about how you're going to find files that you've stored on either your file server or your network attached storage. Now, if you're using Windows, the best way to store files on a server is, without any doubt at all, to use a Windows file server. With this, you get proper integration with Windows Search into Windows, so you can search from the search box in Windows 10, for instance, or in File Explorer, because it integrates with Windows Search. If you're using network attached storage, Either it has to be running a Windows Server, and there are some options that run Windows Server, or most likely it's going to be running Linux. Now, if you're running Linux, it doesn't mean that you can't search the storage, but it doesn't integrate with Windows search, so it's not indexed. So when you search, it's going to be quite slow because the disk, the operating system, it needs to traverse every single file in order to find what it's looking for. It's not searching the Windows search catalog. So when you search in Windows 10 against the local file system, let's say your My Documents folder, you get an instant result or an almost instant result, regardless of what it is that you're searching for. But if you're searching a Linux-based NAS device, you're going to have much slower search results. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Now, that may or may not be a problem, depending on how you decide to access those files. Now, of course, you can access a NAS device using Windows Explorer, but when you're dealing with videos and music and photographs, we tend to look at specialist software in order to help us browse and organize those kinds of files. Now, I'm going to talk specifically today about Adobe Bridge. It's a free piece of software. It's like a companion piece of software to things like Photoshop and Lightroom. But you don't have to have those pieces of software to download Bridge. And basically what it is, it's a file explorer especially designed for media, specifically photographs, but not only. You can use it to manage videos, PDFs, audio files, all of your media on a NAS drive. So what's great about Bridge? So Bridge allows you to basically browse those remote files on your network attached storage much faster and in a much more flexible way than File Explorer will allow you to do it. So for instance, you can see thumbnails. Well, you can do that in File Explorer too, but it will catch the thumbnails so that they are very fast. You can resize them, and it will also give you image previews. So you can see on the screen here that I have a folder, Krakow June 2019. This is from my network attached storage, which is a Linux-based device. And you can see here what Adobe Bridge has done is it's cached all of the information it needs to so that I can browse around this folder very quickly. So I have all of my thumbnails cached on the local device. And if you see here, I can click a photo and I get a very quick preview. So I don't have to wait a long time for it to pull that information from the network drive. Of course, this takes a few minutes for it to actually generate all this stuff when you first add a folder from your drive, but then it allows you to browse around and do things very quickly. And I can do all sorts of things like change the size of the thumbnails, for instance. I can view in different modes. So I can view here in film strip mode or in metadata mode, so I can see more information about each file. And I've got a much more comprehensive view than is possible through File Explorer. Now, Adobe Bridge can do lots of great things. Not only do you have all of these previews and you can browse around everything very quickly, any changes that you make to the file, any metadata that you add, for instance, is written directly to the file itself. And that's important to note when I come to talk about a different category of software in a minute. You can do things like batch renames. You can, of course, add keywords and ratings. There's a built-in file viewer. And, you know, it doesn't do anything more than that, but this piece of software really helps you to access all of that information on your network attached storage and browse it in a very convenient way. Now, there is a different category of software where I said that Adobe Bridge is basically a file browser for media files. You've also got things like the organizer that comes with Adobe Photoshop Elements and Adobe Premiere Elements. So Organizer that comes with those Elements programs creates a catalog, a searchable catalog on the disk, on your local disk, that is. It doesn't actually move the media file from the network attached storage to the catalog, but it catalogues all the media information, the metadata information, and it keeps all that stuff in basically a database or a catalogue on your local PC. And there are a couple of advantages to this situation in that it allows you to search very quickly if you want to look for something, because you're not searching the NAS like you would with Adobe Bridge, you're searching the index catalogue. Now the disadvantage with this approach is that it's not very convenient if you want to share the catalogue. It's not really designed to be shared. It's designed to work on the local PC, and that is it. So everybody needs to create their own catalogue on their own device. The other disadvantage is that information that you might change or add to a file is stored in the catalogue, not in the file itself. So whereas Adobe Bridge adds any metadata to the file, and that metadata of course moves with the file if you change from one NAS device to another NAS device, the Elements Organizer software, it keeps all the information about the file in a separate catalogue. So it can be a problem when you move the files, it can be a problem if you want to migrate that information. For instance, if you want to change or upgrade the software, the Elements Organizer software, you also have to think about migrating the catalogue. So it's not really ideal for scenarios where you've got a shared NAS and lots of people need access to the same information on the NAS. So I would recommend probably Adobe Bridge, while it's a little bit less convenient in terms of it doesn't have things like facial recognition, so you have to go through and actually tag photographs, manually gives them ratings. The Elements software organizes that stuff a little bit more automatically for you. It also has quite a lot of disadvantages if you need to share that media with other people. I can also talk a little bit about the Windows Photo app in Windows 10. Again, it's really designed for use with local files or files in the cloud, OneDrive for instance. It doesn't work especially well with a NAS. That's not to say that it doesn't work, it does, but it's not the greatest experience, let's put it like that. It's a consumer, of course, orientated piece of software, but it does have the advantage of things like facial recognition, so it can automatically tag people in your photographs, which again is something that Adobe Bridge doesn't do. If you want that kind of functionality from Adobe, you'd need to pay for Photoshop Elements, or Lightroom also has that functionality, I believe, but not in the free Bridge. So we have storage sorted out where we're going to store our files. We know how we're going to back them up. We know probably something about the software that we can use to browse and organize the files. File Explorer and the Windows 10 Photos app, not ideal for media management. There are a couple of other tips that I'd like to share with you today. If you've got a camera that shoots in RAW format, I would recommend that, especially if you're using the built-in Windows 10 Photo app, that you put all of your RAW files into a separate folder. Part of the reason for that is no matter how you sort the files in File Explorer, let's say you want to have a look through the JPEG files, even if you sort in File Explorer and start opening the first JPEG that comes in the list, the Windows 10 Photo app doesn't necessarily open the files in the order that you sorted them. So it will open the first JPEG, maybe another one if you're lucky, but as soon as it comes across a RAW file, it will just hang. Okay, it won't say, I can't open this file because I don't know how to read it. It will just hang. And it looks like it's trying to open the next JPEG, but in fact, it's not doing that. It's just hanging on a file that it doesn't know how to read. So it can look like you've got a problem with the app or a problem with the network, but in fact it's about, it just can't read the file, okay? But if you put all of your RAW files into a separate folder, you won't experience that problem. Now, having said that, there is an extension for Windows that you can download from the Microsoft Store that will allow File Explorer and the Windows 10 Photo app to deal with those RAW files. But again, don't forget, if you're going to view through a folder that also contains RAW files, especially if you're on Wi-Fi. It's going to take quite a while to pull that file, that raw file, from the disk so that you can actually view it. If you're using something like Adobe Bridge, at least you can have a look at the preview of a raw file, so you don't have to wait, quite a lot of time, in fact, for that to be pulled off of your remote storage. So that's really all that I want to say about media files in Windows. You're probably going to need something more than File Explorer and the default Photos app. I would strongly recommend looking at NAS storage and backing it up to an archive blob in the cloud. I would also look at specialist software for managing and browsing those files. I think Adobe Bridge is a great place to start, and it is for a professional use, of course. There is a little bit of a learning curve, but it's pretty easy to use. Okay, that's it for this week, and thanks for joining me.